Hello guys, welcome back to another video here on the Banjo Addict page. Thank you so much for pushing that play button. I greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy tips and advice on how to get better on the banjo, guys, this is a page for you. Please consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss a future video. So today, what I want to talk to you all about, and I've had a lot of people message me and ask me questions about fretting. They're having problems with fretting on the banjo. And so I thought this would be a good chance. I know I've talked about it in the past on videos. I've touched on it here and there on a fretting, but I think I've really done a video dedicated to fretting and doing it the proper way on the banjo, or the way that I learned how to do it and it's worked out for me. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, guys, is how to fret on the banjo and how to go about it. I'm not really going to talk about as much as the chord shapes and all that, as much as just the process of fretting and how to properly practice it and hone it to that way you get it right and precise and all the chords are nice and crisp and clear. So let's get started. All right, the first thing I want to say before we get started on anything on the neck, there's a very important step that I think a lot of people miss when they're trying to learn how to fret on the banjo. And the main thing is your banjo, when you practice or play, I seriously recommend wearing a strap on the banjo to hold the banjo, not necessarily to hold it up as much as just to stabilize it. Because see, if I let my banjo go, the neck don't move, and that's a very important thing with the banjo. Whether if you don't have a strap, you can get there's little flimsy straps that they make that are cloth, that are real nice, inexpensive to use, that just clip onto your pegs here, and you can use those to hold the banjo. But the main thing is to get the banjo set to where when you ain't touching it with your hands, the neck ain't falling and moving around. It's stable. It's right there. Now I have the opportunity. I'm not holding the weight of the neck with my hand. I'm not having to hold it up and try to fret at the same time. I have freedom of movement now when I want to fret a chord. So sorry guys, like I've told you all, I have not picked this thing up since the first of the year and practiced on it any. And also, I apologize if I'm a little rusty on my finger movements. You want to wear a neck strap like this to hold the banjo in position, or if you haven't got a neck strap, place it in between your thighs on your lap, and you should be able to put pressure on it. Not a lot of pressure, you know what I'm saying? You're not trying to just cram it down against you, but just enough pressure to hold it in place up here to where this hand isn't having to hold any pressure at all. You want this hand to be free sliding and not have any tension against it whatsoever. The next thing, guys, is hand positioning on the neck itself. And I'm trying to scoot to where you all can see the neck very well. But when you're practicing it and you're first doing it, the knuckle on your thumb right here, if you imagine that knuckle on your thumb being on the center line of the neck of the banjo as you're fretting, and then reaching your fingers around to get whatever chord you want to get. You can have it up a little bit where your thumb may be showing a little bit up here, but you want that thumb to be resting on the center line of your neck. That way you get now I know at first when you do this, it's easy to set it up into the palm of your hand, and I know other people do that. I know like Jim Pankey likes to set it on his finger right here, on his first knuckle of his finger, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but he has done it for a long time and he knows the feel of what it needs to be. And you've always got to have a gap in between your hand right here and the side of the neck up through there, because if you don't get that gap in there, if you're crammed up on this string, it starts getting into a muted sound. So like say I've got the F chord and my hand's up against the string on the fifth string here. Hear that? It's muted. And if I pull my hand away, it opens that up. So you've got to have distance right here between your hand and the side of that neck, because what will happen is the fat of your hand will get into that string right there, and it will start causing it to be muted, and it'll sound muted, and you won't know why it's happening, but it's starting to happen. So take your thumb, first knuckle, and right on the center line of the banjo, and place it there, and then that's where you work from for your chords. Which is why it's important that you wear a strap, because you're not using this hand to hold the banjo neck up. You're just using that thumb as just a pressure point when you go to fret to put some pressure against the strings. But just make sure that as you're doing that your thumb stays in the center of your chord. So like a C chord, say, we'll put a C chord up here, like my thumb is in the center of that C chord. It ain't up here like behind the neck, and it ain't down, and I ain't moving it all around. It's right in the center of that chord. If I go to an F chord, let's say, if I can get my damn fingers on it, my thumb is in the center of that chord. It's not laid up, it's not a wrap, it's not all this. It's right in the center, right behind that chord shape. It's important that you learn how to do that, and maybe not for like early, as you're learning the banjo, it's not as important that your thumb is in that shape, that your thumb is right in the center and behind your chord, but it's good to learn that habit, because later on what you'll get into is you'll get into doing like a chord like this, and then you're reaching down here with your pinky. Well, it's a lot easier to make that reach with your pinky like this, with that thumb back behind the fretboard and the center of your chord, than it is like if I had it up here and I'm trying to reach, see that pinky? Like if my thumb's wrapped around and that neck is down in here, well then I gotta say a D7. Well, I cannot reach with my pinky down there to fret that right there if I wanted to, right? So if my thumb is behind it and I got a D7, now my pinky can reach. And so it's really important later on, some things that you'll be reaching on, especially down here down the neck, that your thumb stays center line of your hand. That way it increases the reach on your pinky. That way you can reach other chords and stuff, and it's good to get in that habit now. The next thing, guys, is when you're fretting a chord, say you're fretting a C chord. And it depends on each banjo what the amount of pressure you're gonna have to put down on the strings in order to fret the chord is. But generally think you only want to put enough pressure against the chord to touch the fret. That's all you want. You don't want to cram it real down, because if you cram it down real hard, like if you try to pinch on that chord real hard, you may sharpen the note. So you just want to push it down to where it just touches the fret, and kind of get used to that feeling with the banjo that you're playing. You just want to put your fingers on there and push down just enough to touch the frets. And there's a little pressure there against the frets, but you don't want to just cram it down as hard as you can cram it down. You want to get your finger, what you want to do is get your finger as close to that fret right there as you can on whatever string you're fretting on. You'll get it right behind where the fret's at. Now you ain't got to be right up on top of the fret, because a lot of times that'll deaden it out. See that? My finger's on top of the fret, it'll deaden it out. So if I go right behind the fret, and you just want enough room to where that thing will go down and touch that fret and fret it. Now you don't have to hit it perfect every time. It's gonna vary a little bit where your finger frets as you're playing, but you don't want to come way back here, because that's where you start getting buzz. And you can see about right there, it clears up. So right there is about where you want to be at. And again, like I said, you just want to put enough pressure on the string to touch the fret. One other thing, guys, too, I forgot to say earlier, is you got your thumb center line of the neck, and you're fretting a chord, right? Well, notice, which it's hard to do if you're doing that, it's hard not to have your wrist rolled forward. See how my wrist is rolled out? I'm giving my fingers all the possible room I can give them. With my thumb where it's at on the behind the neck, and my fingers on the fretboard, I'm giving my fingers the maximum amount of room that I can give them to reach and do whatever I need to do when I need to do it. And so that's something else too. You can't have this up on the neck, and that wrist needs to be rolled out, thumb in behind on the neck, and then your fingers on the correct. Sometimes too, you can get into a chord shape, and as you're playing, you can kind of just slide your fingers down as you get into that fret shape. One other thing, guys, is like it's just like your right hand as you're playing and trying to learn rolls with your right hand, and you get tense and you get like, and you're trying to do stuff and you can't. The same thing will happen with your left hand. Don't let your left hand get tension. You want both hands to be loosey goosey. So if you feel tension in your hand, shake it out. Get that tension out of it, and then go back to doing your chord shapes. Especially if you're playing, like if you're right hand and you're playing something and you're trying to get a little speed, and you've worked on a song and you know how to play it, and you're trying to get a little speed in there, a lot of times what will happen is trying to build up speed with your right hand, you'll gain tension in your left hand, and if you feel that happening, just stop and just kind of shake it out. You know what I'm saying? Get that tension out of there, and because if you don't get into that habit, then it will be harder later down the road for it to come creeping in. All right, guys, bonus tip. Last but not least, this is something that later on down the road, that if you're a beginner on banjo, that you will get into. Possibly you can get into it, and if you don't have railroad spikes or a capo for the fifth string, later on there's a technique which I'm not proficient on it because I haven't really practiced it a whole lot, but there is times down here that you can be fretting a chord or whatever if you're playing up the neck, and you can wrap your thumb around and actually capo the fifth string or fret the fifth string with your thumb as you're doing chords with your hand down here on the bottom. It's something to look into. I wouldn't really worry a whole lot about it right now. I would more or less go with railroad spikes like I have here on my banjo, but just know that is out there. That being said, thank you so much for pushing that play button. We will see you next week.